Good evening. My name's Rob Ryder, speaking out of West Cornwall. And again, I'm joined tonight with Patrick Quanton, speaking out of Andalusia. Hi again, Patrick.
Hello, good evening.
Yeah, so as usual, straight onto it. At the moment, if you're watching on YouTube, you may have noticed I've changed the title slightly to Your Health in Your Hands, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, exam, etc. Because if you notice, there's a strategy in where we're going. So even though you can dip in and out of these talks, it is a good idea to build, because the previous talk on trauma won't be fully understood unless you listen to the talk on foundation of a human, the formation of a human being. And I'll try and retitle that on Rumble as well. So I'm just going to do a very quick recap on last week, and then we'll get on to tonight's subject. So last week was trauma, and we had a little bit of a conversation about dogs living through a traumatic event, finding time to rest, taking some learning knowledge out of it, and then moving on with life. And I mentioned that, you know, the only dogs that attack me when I'm working are rescue dogs that people will allow to move on. And funny enough, I just thought I'd mention this because it's strange how a thing happens. There's a lady I know who I clean windows for, who I seen the other day. She come around the corner with a new dog, and as soon as the dog realized I was going over to say hello, it lunged at me to attack me. And the lady said, listen, don't worry, it's a rescue dog. And she's there patting the dog, saying, don't worry, calm down. And I said, you may think he's not going to bite, but the intention is there to attack. And I don't think I want him near me, to be honest. And I didn't want to have a big conversation, but it was just another example of the behavior carried on from a trauma or whatever it was, being comforted, and the new owner saying, we don't do this here now. This is a new environment. Whatever your need to do that isn't here now. And like you spoken last week, sometimes you need a direct interference. And the dog didn't get that. So I thought that was interesting because we were talking about it. Another quick observation on dogs, because this has been my passion for many years, I've learned a lot with dogs, is when you came over to do your seminar, I did mention to that we have a dog, Coco, and he's anxious, not aggressive, but he's anxious and nervous. And when we have visitors, he barks, not in a nasty, aggressive way, but out of being unsure. And so we had a chat in the car before you came in. And I said, listen, just don't look at him. Caesar Milan says, no touch, no talk, no eye contact, just go in. And we had a plan to put a bit of a dried chicken foot in your hand. And again, you didn't talk to him, and you just put your hand down and diverted his attention. And why this is so important is this will be a continuing theme going through our talks, I believe, is we were creating a meaning. What is the meaning of this man coming into my house? It's not you, as in the environment, that was the problem. He didn't have a meaning. And the meaning came from being unsure, a potential threat, to, oh, this is the man that gives me chicken. And so we created a meaning quite quickly, and dogs respond to that. So I just thought I'd mention that because I think the progress of these talks will go about, yes, we have an objective environment, but it's the meaning we put on it. And again, go back to what you mentioned via trauma last week. Yes, you can have what you believe to be a traumatic event, but it's the meaning and response that we put on it that has the longer lasting effect. That's just my observations on dogs. And one last little thing, because I'm a very, very practical person. And now I know some people might think, well, last week we spoke about trauma, and we just spoke basically people have to somehow found a way to move on and let it go, and maybe take a positive lesson out of maybe a not so pleasant event. And one little thing I did many, many years ago, before I even started studying the human condition, was a friend of mine. She was having a few problems, and we walked into an open field, top of a hill, and I just said, whatever you're feeling about whatever's going on, just let it all go and scream at the top of your voice. Any profanities, if you want to laugh, you want to cry, just let it go. And so just a slight expansion on what we said last week about somehow having the ability to move on is, for me, I have a vision, whether it's correct or not, of a trauma that stays with you as being a toxic energy field in your system. And rather like food that hasn't been digested, it becomes toxic. And so if I go back to this episode with my friend in the field, and this is just one practical thing somebody could do, it doesn't mean it'd work, but if you can process what's happening in your mind, the trauma, imagine it as an energy field, go into an open field and kind of mentally go into that and just throw it out. And if you want to laugh, if you want to cry, if you want to be angry, whatever, and then make a mental decision and visually see that energy field go. And that's just one little practical thing that is a possible aid to somebody. So that's just my slight recap before we go on to tonight. So I just wondered if you've got any comments on a recap.
No, I think that's where the focus should lie. It's not the environment that is causing the problem, it's our response to it. And that will crop up time and time again. That's the central issue of health. Whatever environment you're in, if you are accommodating your environment, if you're in tune with your environment, if you can handle your environment, then you're healthy. And that's basically it.
Yeah. So tonight, this is a chapter in your book, Your Health in Your Hands. And I think it's on page 193, where we go into allergies. But we go into allergies, or yourself, you go into allergies with a different perspective that many people would have heard before. Because always the focus is on the allergen. Yeah. So I'm not going to give a big introduction to this question tonight. So I'd just rather you now be free to talk through an understanding, a deeper understanding of allergies.
Right. The thing with allergies is two things. One is a sensitivity towards something in the environment. So whether that's food or smells or whatever it is, things that you've touched, or and you have an overreaction to it. It's a sensitivity. And that is how things were used to be known as sensitivities and hypersensitivity. Allergy, the word allergy is actually a medical diagnosis. So it's a doctor who tells you you've got an allergy. Amongst people, we just talk about sensitivities. Essentially, we're talking about the same things. As far as the individual is concerned, they experience an overreaction. What that may be, that may have something to do with your breathing or your digestive system or your skin or your eyes, or it doesn't matter. It's an overreaction to something. An allergy is a medical diagnosis, and Western medicine thinks or feels that they have to know everything and that they have to find objective ways of indicating or pronouncing that somebody is ill. So an allergy is whenever they can measure, however they do that, whenever they can measure a change in your immune reaction. So if you have a sensitivity to something, you have a reaction to something, and their tests come back negative, then you don't have an allergy. Then you're just oversensitive to something. If their tests come back positive, you have an allergy. So for the rest of the evening, sensitivities, oversensitivities, hypersensitivities, and allergies, we talk about it in the same sentence. It's interchangeable as far as we are concerned. So then the question is, why does a person get an overreaction to something? Bearing in mind that this something is not an unusual thing. These are things that are around us all the time, or a lot of the time. Things we come in contact with a lot of the time. So why all of a sudden you get an overreaction to it? What's more, we see that allergies develop over time. So somebody might develop an allergy when they're 35 to something that they've been exposed to all their lives. So why would the allergen, as the doctor calls it, the stuff that you respond to, why would that actually be the cause of your allergy? If for 35 years it has never done anything seemingly to you, and now all of a sudden it does. Other things, why would you respond in an oversensitive way to something that the rest of the world almost is not overreacting to? So it's not, again, it's not the stuff itself that is the problem. Pollen have been around for longer than humans have been around. So why are we, some of us, allergic to pollen? Why are some of us allergic to nuts? Yeah, so we shouldn't concentrate our minds on finding out what the allergen is, what the chemical constitution of that allergen is, and what exactly it is that we are responding to. Because it's only some of us that are responding. So we should be investigating or looking at the person who is responding and not the stuff that he's responding to. Very important point to make, because that really focuses our attention on something totally different. We now need to look at the person. Okay, what is this person doing? This person is overreacting to something. So the reaction is out of proportion, out of normality. Too much of a reaction. Why would a body do that? Well, a body will do that when it needs to. Why? Why would it need to respond in such an extreme way after 35 years of being exposed to it and never had any problems with it? Why would it do it to a stuff that other people have a normal response to, have no problems with? There must be something in this person, inside the system of that person, that triggers it. Not the allergen, not the stuff itself, but something inside the person that makes him or her respond excessively to the exposure. Whenever a system is responding extremely, it means that the pressure on that system under those circumstances is enormous. The system feels threatened in those circumstances, and then it responds really badly, or it responds extremely. Just like when an animal feels threatened because you've cornered it, it will attack. It will become vicious. So same with your system. Something is there that the system feels is a potential danger. That same thing may have not been a danger previously, or not been a potential danger previously, or in under other circumstances. But at that time, it is recognized, it is seen as a potential danger. So why would normal things that are around us normally, become seen as dangerous. Well, what is danger to a system? Anything that makes the function of that system almost impossible. So when the system has a sense that when it has to deal with this stuff, it won't be able to, then it will respond in a way that it will either stop you from being exposed to it or quickly get rid of the stuff that you've been exposed to, you've eaten or touched your skin with or whatever. So your system is afraid. It's afraid that it can't cope with what you are exposing it to. Because we're focusing constantly on a physical reality, we're trying to link that fear to the presence of a physicality, of matter. That is why we say, I'm allergic to nuts, I'm allergic to pollen, I'm allergic to gold, as in jewelry or whatever. I am allergic to a particular thing. We don't actually say, my system is afraid of having to deal with this. We don't look at the situation that we find ourselves in at that particular moment in time, but also in general. What situation is our life at the moment an allergy, an oversensitivity shows up? Because that is what is important. You know, you may have for 35 years lived your life in a certain way and not have had any trouble with it. But gradually, as you are getting older, you may find, or your system may find, that it becomes more and more difficult to do it that way. So therefore, it now starts to fight back. It now starts to show you, it gives you signs that things are not okay, right? So a system that tells you it can no longer cope with a certain material thing, with it being exposed to a certain material thing. It's not that material thing. It's about the pathway that your system needs to deal with that particular thing that is important. Because everything that we come in contact with, the system, the physical material body system, needs to deal with it. It needs to break it down, recycle it, and excrete the stuff that it doesn't need any longer. So it needs to operate, it needs to put energy into this recycling and breakdown system. If that system is overloaded or is threatened to become overloaded, then certain things that will fit into that pathway and use up energy and blocks the pathway that the system needs in order to clean up that particular material and stuff that are much alike, but that are necessary to be cleaned up. When you block that pathway or threaten to block that pathway, the system will tell you immediately that exposure to more of it is really a threat and it can't cope with it. So that is the message in an oversensitivity reaction and or an allergy. So we need to look at what state the person is in. We also said that what is actually becoming blocked is the cleanup pathway. So the body is constantly cleaning itself, recycling. Why? Because cells are active, so they're doing stuff. When you have an activity, you also leave waste products. Those waste products is what the body needs to get rid of quickly, because if you have bad waste management and the waste is mounting, it is going to interfere with normal procedures. Think about it as a town, lots of houses, lots of people living there in their little units, and the units, you can see them as cells. There's activity going on within those cells, each of those cells, and they all produce waste. Yeah, kitchen waste, yeah, food waste. But also, I mean, in the old days it was all much clearer. You know, you may have to clean out the stove. What do you do with the ashes? Yeah, they've got to go. You know? Other stuff, old iron, all of this that you no longer need, no longer require, old clothes, old shoes, you no longer require, you need to get rid of. In a town, what do? You can't move. You live there. That's where you stay. So what you do is you put all your rubbish in the street on your front doorstep. And then there is a system within a town. So a lorry that comes by picks up all the different bits of material, waste material, and moves it away to be recycled, to be dumped, to whatever. Now just imagine that that truck is not coming. So you put your waste out the front door, and your neighbor does, and their neighbor, and so on and so forth. Everybody puts their, and it stays there. And the waste products stay there. So very soon, it starts to pile up inside the road. The road gets smaller, so the traffic, which means all the supplies, you know, the baker, the butcher, and the candlestick maker can't get through anymore. So life within that town virtually stops. This is what happens inside your body. But it's a living thing, and it looks after itself. So if the mountain of waste is increasing inside your body, then your system will try and reduce that particular waste that is staying on your front doorstep. It will try and tell you not to do that, to reduce the amount of waste that that unit, that cell, is producing, that particular sort of waste. So these particular waste products that stay around the cell are threatening to block the function of the cell. So the cell finds it very difficult to stay alive. The system warns you to stay away from that stuff. Yeah? Food-wise, there's certain things you no longer like. And if you have the choice, you don't want to eat it. If you don't get that message, if you don't listen to that message, the system will go a step beyond that. It will make you ill. It will have such a vicious response that you have to take note. So, for instance, you could feel sick, start vomiting, have major major tummy cramps, diarrhea, and so on. Or your breathing can be affected. Or your skin swells up, gets red, gets inflamed, itches a lot, hurts a lot, just so that you know. Take note, stay away from that material. But basically, it's because that material has a link to the kind of waste products that your system is dealing with and is struggling with. So in effect, oversensitivity, allergies, they are due to an accumulation of waste products inside that particular person. And that is why at that time of the exposure, you get the response. So the first thing that people do when they start noticing that they are not okay with certain stuff, then they go, oh no, I can't have that because I have a bad reaction to that. And that, of course, is true. So the first step is avoidance. Yeah. Medical profession would say, stay away from that, avoid that allergen. Doesn't matter what name you use, you avoid that stuff. And instinctively, that is what you want to do. You remember the painful reaction that you had, and you try and stay away from the stuff. So that should solve the problem. Well, it doesn't. Medical profession will tell you, and people that are allergic to things, they will tell you that over years, as they're getting older, they're getting one allergy after another. From being allergic to one thing, you become allergic to 2 things, to 3 things, to 30 things. How is that possible? If it's due to the allergen, if the allergen is the cause of your overreaction, then there's no particular reason why after a few years of being allergic to one thing, you become allergic to another thing. It's a totally different thing you become allergic to. They're not related. So how would that happen unless there was something wrong inside the body? And what is going wrong? Avoiding the particular stuff that you have an overreaction to, that ensures that the system is not exposed to excess stuff that will lead to excess waste. But you continue to live the same life in the same way as you've always done, which means you create the same waste products as you've always done, and the amount of waste as you've always done. But you have gained an allergic reaction, an oversensitivity. You've gained that over the years, which means that over all those years, you were already overproducing waste products. So avoiding the one thing that you have an overreaction to doesn't stop your overproduction of waste in general. So it continues, and the more waste becomes a problem to your system, the more areas of that system, of your body, the functions of your body, the more areas that will become affected by the accumulation of that waste. So therefore, more and more functions of the body will start to struggle. And that is why over the years, people become allergic to more and more and more things all the time. So allergies, oversensitivities are caused by accumulation of waste. And waste products are the end result of the activity of the cells. Why would those cells create more waste than normal? Because they have an overactivity. An activity that is the higher rate uses up more energy than normal. If you burn more energy, then you create more waste products. So your life is under so much pressure, your cells are doing overtime continuously, thereby producing continuously more waste. That waste stays. It can't be dealt with in time, so it accumulates around the cells, in the tissues, in the organs, and it affects the function of those cells, organs, and tissues. So an allergy should be a warning sign to people, a warning sign that says you can't continue your life in this way. You're not made to live this way. The way you're living is too much pressure on the system. The system can't cope with it. It is telling you that. So what do you need to do? Well, in the short term, you could say, let's get rid of the excess waste that is lying around my system. So you can do detoxification, and there are various ways of doing that. They all have their benefits. Choose one if you want to. But that doesn't solve the problem, or that only solves the problem for a short period of time, because you lower the amount of waste that is there, but you continue your life in the same way as you did before, which accumulates waste. So very soon, you'll be back up where you were before. In order to stop that and make sure that never happens again, is to change your life. You need to make some fundamental changes in your life so that the innate pressure on your life is less than it was before. Put it in a different way, change your life to something that suits you, that suits your systems, the way you've been put together, that is much more you than the life that you're leading now. You should, we all should, be able to live our lives under much less pressure than we are living it right now. And that is also the reason why, when we look at it over the decades, that the number of allergies recorded by the medical profession is increasing rapidly. So not only the individual is noticing that there is a change as he or she is getting older, but also as society is getting older, it is getting worse and worse. And it's to do with the pressure that we as individuals and as a group are living under. More pressure means more energy required in order to keep the function going. More energy required means more waste products, but there is a limit as to what your system can recycle or excrete. In other words, there's a limit to the amount of waste that your system can get rid of quickly enough. So the waste accumulates, and that becomes a life-threatening situation. And the medical profession doesn't want to see it like that. Nobody wants to see it like that. But it is an early warning sign. You don't take any notice, it will only get worse.
Right, so I've got quite a few comments or observations there. It's because there's about 4 or 5, I think it's probably best we go through them one by one.
Okay.
So I'll start with an example. When I started looking into this, when we talk about a response to something in the environment, and if we're always going in on the idea that the body responds in balance to how it perceives the world, then I always give the example of, say, maybe there's been a woman who's been brutally attacked, maybe raped by a man in a quiet street, and she's had that experience in her system. And then maybe I might be walking down a road, a quiet road, with another man, a friend of mine, and we're walking down the street. And I might just, politely say, "Oh, good afternoon," to a lady that's coming the other way. And her response might be fear, anger, cross the road, run, get away. And I might be thinking, what on earth is that? That's an incredible overreaction for me just saying good evening or good morning. But with further knowledge, you'd realize actually, considering her experience that I wouldn't know of, that would have been an intelligent reaction to how she perceives the environment. So again, we talk about overreactions, which they are on when we look at them, but within the intelligence of the whole system, whether the system is perceiving something not in a beneficial way, it's still responding in an intelligent way and quite a balanced way because of how it perceives the situation.
Yeah, of course, we use the word overreaction, which means a reaction that is more extreme than normal. What is normal? Normal is what we as human beings would expect the reaction to be. And so it's a reaction that most people would have, or something of that nature. Anything that is more extreme, we call an overreaction. But your example is very good because it indicates quite clearly that whatever your intentions are on the outside, in the environment, there's no malice in there, but if it's perceived as a threat, as a potential malice. So therefore the system responds. And as you say, it responds intelligently because it scares you away. When you get that kind of reaction, as you just described, you don't run after this lady and say, "Hey, no, you have to say good morning to me too, because I told you, I said good morning, so you have." No, you leave her alone and you think, what the hell was that? But it was intelligent from her perspective. So it's always look to the person, not to the environment, if you want to try and comprehend a disease pattern.
Yeah. A slightly quick one here is homeopathic remedies regarding allergies. A lot of people say if you've got a pollen allergy, that before the pollen season starts, maybe when we're coming into early spring, take a little teaspoon of local raw honey every day. And so people talk about that building up your immunity. So that's kind of a physical sense. But in a way, it could be trying to expose your system very gently to what the pollen represents before the full pollen season kind of kicks in. Is there any use for homeopathic remedies in that sense?
Well, it is exactly that, as you said. What a homeopathic remedy does is it exposes your energetic system to a particular energy, say frequency. So an energy that you may get exposed to, in this case, the pollen, or in this example, the pollen. So what does that do? It wakes up your energy system. It activates your energy system. So it gets your system more ready to deal with whatever is coming. Yeah, that is okay for a little while. As long as your system can respond by increasing its energy level, it then has a little bit more to work with, because an increased energy level, and if it is targeted well enough, then it will be an energy level that will help to be ready for whatever is coming, in this case, pollen season. So your system has got more energy to spend on that particular item. That is okay for as long as your system can actually generate more energy to be spent on that particular item. Because there comes a time when it won't be able to respond at all to your homeopathic remedy anymore. It will fade out just because you haven't changed anything. Keeps coming at you time and time and time and time and time again. So it's not a defense. It's just a waking up call so that you're ready in time, but you still have to deal with it. Yeah. So it's not a cure. It helps particularly in short-term or allergies on a short-term basis. So where it's limited in time, if you can get over that, you may be okay again. Allergies that occur particularly in springtime, there the winter time is a contributing factor, because in winter time we're more turned inwards. We turn down our metabolism a bit, so sort of a hibernation state, if you like, a minor hibernation state. And so when you have to wake up those energies again in springtime, you may be a bit too late and too slow to do so, which may cause you problems during the pollen season. But still, if that is what happens to you every year, then it makes a lot more sense towards the end of the winter time to actually do a serious detoxification course, clean up your system, and then you won't need to wake up your system, because your system will have enough energy reserves to deal with whatever comes its way.
Yeah, so on the opposite scale of that, what the medical profession provide is antihistamines to kind of turn off the response. But again, that's just short-term gain and long-term loss, because you're just delaying the inevitable, possibly making yourself even more susceptible because you're not actually dealing with anything with antihistamine.
Yeah, the histamine is actually one of the chemicals that that cells produce within this process, and the process is create an inflammation reaction. An inflammation reaction is a reaction to clean up or to speed up the cleaning up of waste products. Yeah. If you interfere with that by trying to stop the reaction, then you don't get the expression of your oversensitivity. So you don't get your inflammation of your skin or your inflammation of your digestive tract or whatever. But the waste products are still there. They're not burned away by the inflammation reaction as normally would happen. So they remain in place. And therefore, the next lot on top of that, and on top of that, and on top of that, and it will rapidly get worse. And the worst bit will show up as a chronic disease. It doesn't have to be allergy, and allergy is then a sideline, if you like, but you may have accumulated in certain places, you may have accumulated so much waste that that particular function starts to seriously break down. and never recovers.
Yeah. So it's kind of sticking in the physical areas, it seems possibly, I'm saying, that allergies are more known in, say, modern Western cultures. We lived in the Amazon for a while. It wasn't something I was aware of, that, allergies are everywhere in the Western world. Now, I can't remember this study. I wish I'd have studied it actually and found it before. But I'm sure biochemist Trevor Gunn mentioned something. Now, don't quote me on this. I don't want to misquote Trevor, but he's really well researched on this area. But I'm sure he quoted a study regarding East and Western Germany. Eastern Germany would, what we would say, more polluted, but there were more allergies on the Western side. Now, don't quote me on that, but I'm just trying to get in my head that it's not just necessarily a polluted environment, where there was things happening in the so-called cleaner Western world. So is there any truth in that in the Western world, we have more allergies than in maybe more primitive people, should we say?
I think that is general given, that is for sure the case. And you can you can extend that. It's not the pollution in the air or in the soil or whatever, or in your food. If you look at the Western world, what is the general idea about health? It's to clean up everything, to make everything as pure as possible, right? Their medications, it's the active ingredient, not the entire herb, for instance, but the active ingredient. They've refined sugar, they've refined salt, they've refined our cereals. Everything has become refined and cleaned up. And what is the result? Right? In the most clean environments, like hospital theaters, we get the infections, bacteria, that are the most resistant to all antibiotics. In other words, those bacteria can defy any logic and will create havoc with any tissue that they're introduced into, because they're used to a so clean environment. So we've cleaned up water, right? Don't drink the water coming down the mountain anymore. Drink it out of a lead pipe. But in order to keep that water clean, we have to put all kinds of stuff in it. And it creates more problem. It is less feeding, less nourishing to us than the water that runs down from the mountain. All this cleaning up that we're doing, cleaning up the air, cleaning up the water, cleaning up the soil, cleaning up our food, makes it more difficult to deal with. Milk, pasteurized milk, and it becomes almost indigestible to our system. If we have raw milk, traditionally, it was just been boiled. That is enough to clean it up, enough for it without the system, the milk system, to break down into pieces that our own system no longer recognizes. So you create allergies against milk and milk products because of the pasteurization, because you clean it up. Yeah. So I think you're right. The more cleaner we make our environment, the less we are equipped to deal with nature, and the more difficult it becomes for our systems to survive in a clean, clinically clean almost environment. It becomes almost impossible for our systems to function.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, a lot of the ways we're cleaning the environment is with toxic chemicals.
Yeah,
I remember the traditional way to clean a beer bottle in Mexico was a piece of lemon or lime.
yep,
And that's the tradition of putting the lime in the bottle. But it was actually done to disinfect the bottle with just lime juice, natural juice,
yep.
in case a cat had peed on it when it got delivered or something. So nature has its own cleansers, natural cleansers. And by cleaning the environment chemically and being afraid of nature, we're just adding more stuff, should we say, into our bodies that they're not really evolved to deal with, don't want to deal with, and don't need to deal with.
And but the thing with the natural cleaning uh, ways is that our medical profession will then go and test it, and the test result will come back and say there are bacteria in that bottle. Yeah, as if that is a threat to our environment. Every living matter is built from bacteria. So we're quite used to it. We can't do without it. But what we can do without is an overuse of chemical products or chemical substrates that the system can only deal with in small quantities. So we call it poisonous stuff that we use to clean out the bottles in this case. And then we go, oh, yeah, maybe a little bit was left behind, and that is why you got sick, and so on. It isn't that. There are two points to it. One is the bottle is too clean for us, too clean. So whatever you put in it has lost some of its life properties, which you would have if there were naturally living bacteria and the kind that belong there in the bottle. And two, the poisons that you're using, the chemical stuff that you're using, our bodies can deal with all kinds of chemical poisons. It's not a problem. The only thing is, the system doesn't expect to get it day in, day out in a multitude of forms. Yeah, we use chemicals to make our house smell better. We use chemicals to make our clothes smell better. We use chemicals to clean the floor. We use chemicals to do the dishes. We use chemicals for everything. And it's not that particular chemical that will kill us or make us ill. But it's the fact that the waste mountain inside your system just gets higher and higher day by day because we keep adding to it. If we weren't adding to it day by day, then there would be enough time for the system to clean it up completely. And then it wouldn't matter that you then got exposed a bit to whatever chemical you want to name. Body can deal with that. I mean, we can make your body used to taking arsenic. So the body can clean it up. That's not a problem. Yeah. But it's the amount and the fact that it's over such a wide range of chemicals, chemical substrates, that form the problem.
Yeah. So the last question, really. So just a quick comment. Coco, our dog, we got him off a farm. So you could say, I know you've mentioned before, cats are a lot more intelligent than dogs because dogs have been over domesticated. But Coco was a farm dog and a working dog. And he will drink a little bit of tap water at home if that's all available. But as soon as he's out on a run, he'll drink the dirty puddles, he'll drink out of the stream. He has no interest in the water at home unless that's, say if it hasn't rained for a while and that's all that's on offer.
Yeah.
But he loves drinking out of the muddy puddles. We give him raw food. And he's the healthiest dog you'll ever know. And he instinctively knows that what water's fresh and what's good for him.
Yeah. And our dog, on a regular basis, she will eat some grass to help her digestive system, I'm sure. But she's never asked me to wash it first and to clean it first before she eats it.
Yeah. So the last section here, I'm not sure how we are for time, but I think we best leave it on this one, because this is what took me from focusing on the allergen to focusing on the circumstances in which the allergen was introduced to the body, in regards to studies showing that people with split personalities, it seems only one of the personalities would have had the allergic reaction. And people that are in certain psychological states didn't respond to the allergens, which would make me think that one, yeah, there is a physical sensitivity to an overuse of chemicals, so a physical overuse of chemicals, but on which is an issue. But another issue is on some allergies, there's definitely 100% an emotional root or a mind root, because otherwise both personalities if it was a physical thing, both the personalities would respond. So what's your take on that? That's an interesting part in your book.
Yeah, that's correct. The pollen is a very good example as well, because there's been a lot of research done on pollen allergies, and one interesting study showed that people with severe pollen allergy, when they were shown pictures of the air full of pollen and situations where there was a lot of pollen around, they would get an immediate allergic reaction. While there were no pollen in the room where they were sitting, they were just exposed to pictures, but their system instantly responded, right? And other very interesting studies are, as you mentioned, people with multiple personality disorders. So one body that can change from being one person to another person in a matter of seconds. And they would notice that, say, if one personality of that person was had a major allergy, that it disappeared completely and instantly from the moment it switched into another, the person switched into another personality. So you cannot explain that in any physical form. Yeah. Either it's there, and if it's there, it takes time to remove the stuff, to take it away, to dismantle it, and so on. But here it's instant reaction. So we then have to focus on how does, when we say a system, a person responds to the environment, yeah, to the exposure of certain stuff. Well, the response is a conscious response. We respond through our consciousness, through our mind, conscious mind and unconscious mind. Unconscious is what your system has learned and has, if you like, written down in fixed patterns. So yes, some people are exposed to, say, a sauce in which some prawns were lying. They eat it without knowing that there have been some prawns in the sauce, and they immediately get their allergic reaction to the prawns. Yes, so that's an unconscious reaction. A lot of this is aggravated by our conscious mind, because if a doctor now tells you that it's dangerous for you to eat nuts, then your conscious mind will also be on the prowl to identify anything that relates to nuts in your environment. So now your fear for exposure makes the reaction of your system even worse, because it's not just unconsciously, because it knows it's got a lot of waste to deal with and it hasn't got the capacity to deal with it. So it is aware of not wanting to be exposed to more of that stuff. But now your conscious mind is fearful. Fear eats energy, lots of it. It puts your system on a constant high alert. High alert means burning off a lot of energy, means more waste products. Yeah. So your conscious mind aggravates the reaction that your system is having. But the point here is that your physical reaction is an expression of your mind reaction. Your mind knows that this is dangerous, that this will upset the balance of your life. And because it is potentially dangerous to the balance of your life, your mind responds, overreacts, if you like, and that is shown in a particular physical response. So even the exposure to gold jewelry, for instance, or silver jewelry that people are then getting a rash from, it's your unconscious mind that sets off the process of the response. So it's always an energetic exchange, yeah, an energy that is vibrating almost at the end of the band, the freedom band that it's got, and it's vibrating there, and it knows, or it feels, that if it gets pushed a bit further, it will break down. The cycle, yeah, will break down. The wave will break down. So it's trying to protect that, and it tries to keep away from that. It's an energetic exchange that is then expressed into a physical response, the physical matter, a change in the function of your biology, your physical body. But it's not the physical body itself that responds, as research has shown.
Yeah, so just a quick last comment, because I know we're short up for time. So in my example of the lady who'd been attacked, now let's say, for example, she had a split personality. The next day, which was a confident, outgoing woman, the next day we could pass in the street, I could say hello and she could give me a nice smile and say hello back.
Yep.
And that's quite a similar analogy of how this thing could potentially work. Another thing which we can't really talk too much about, but there's certain medical interventions at a young age that introduce toxins into the body that will create a response. I think that could be more relevant when we talk about digestion, possibly, in the body.
Well,
but
not entirely.
I think it's more about the circumstances of meeting the allergen rather than the allergen itself. So when you've got a response to something, if you can jog your memory, if you can go that far back, or if it's a new allergic reaction, and try to take the attention away from the allergen into the environment in which you came around it, circumstances.
Well, if the response is an energetic response, it's a mind response, that's where it starts. Yeah. So a medical intervention can, just as what happened in your story about that woman, a medical intervention can be felt, can be experienced as a life-threatening thing. You know, if somebody cuts out my my tonsils, and I'm not quite asleep or not deep enough. In other words, I have a conscious, semi-conscious, unconscious memory of it. Anything that touches it or that comes close, that I breathe in, that I get into my mouth, and that gives me a similar sort of sense, it may start off an allergic reaction, an overreaction. So the medical interventions can actually introduce allergies, oversensitivities in a similar way, because when we're talking about it in this way, the medical intervention is the environment that you are exposed to at that particular moment in time. And that in itself may feel threatening, very threatening. So never mind the poisons that they put into you, because apparently, we can deal with those kind of stuff. They can poison me so that I lose consciousness and that they can perform open heart surgery on me. And then they take those away and my body cleans them up, the poisons. Yeah. So even there, we shouldn't be looking at the poisons that they're putting into our body. We should be looking at the procedure as to how that is perceived by the patient. If I perceive it as a life-saving intervention, I will never get an allergic reaction. If my unconscious mind tells me this is going to kill you, then I will create, or it might potentially create, an allergic reaction.
Yeah, and I think on a fun note, I'll leave it. I remember getting a lot of men would understand this, playing football and playing sports. They got a severe elbow in the groin, which was quite painful for quite a few days. And like any typical man, when we watch a sports game and you see the ball getting hit between somebody's legs, you automatically, it creates a pain within yourself. That memory of being hit yourself when you were playing football or boxing or whatever, judo, whatever you were doing, you only have to see it on a sports game and it gets you right there, the memory of it alone.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite
that's true.
An interesting illustration to leave it on.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. So I think we're probably about out of time now. So I think we've kind of covered that now. And I think next week we're potentially going to go on to the nature of inflammation and acute illness.
Yeah,
that's possibly the next step.
Seems like a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks again, Patrick, and we'll be back here next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.